So the Goulbourn Museum is located in the city of Ottawa, which is built on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe. The Algonquin peoples have lived on and cared for this land since time immemorial. We deeply appreciate their historic connection to this place and thank them for their contributions, as well as the contributions of the Métis, Inuit, and other Indigenous peoples in shaping and strengthening this community. Tonight, I'm very pleased to be here with the museum's manager and exhibitions curator, Tracy Donaldson, Sarah Halla, our collections officer, and Jonah Ellens, the assistant curator of collections. And tonight, we're going to give a behind-the-scenes look at the projects that have inspired the museum's first solely virtual exhibition, which is actively in development and which will have its first space launch in July this year. The With Love to All exhibition will explore the experiences of youth during the Great War through the focal point of the correspondence between Private Sefton Stewart and his family in Richmond, Ontario. The exhibition represents the next step in a true community effort to preserve, document, and share the Sefton Stewart letters and remember the wartime sacrifices of Goulbourn community members. So before we dive into that wonderful topic, I'll just go over a couple of housekeeping items. The presentation will be about 25 minutes long, and during that time, we will ask everyone to mute their audio so that everyone can hear clearly. And as I mentioned at the top, we are recording this portion of the event in order to post the video online for later viewing. And if you have a question during the presentation, feel free to record it in the chat feature, and we'll try to return to it during the Q&A. At the end of the presentation, we'll open up the floor to a 25-minute question and answer period, and we will make sure to stop recording before the Q&A begins. And you'll be able to participate by typing out a question or comment in the chat, or if you want to ask your question out loud, you can use the raise hand feature by clicking on the participants icon at the bottom of your screen and then selecting raise hand at the bottom right of the screen. And last but definitely not least, I want to acknowledge our programming assistant Paige for joining us tonight as well. She'll be working away behind the scenes, making sure all the tech for this evening is running smoothly. So I'll now invite Tracy and Sarah to the floor to introduce everyone to the community engagement project that was the first step in the path to the upcoming exhibition.
Great, thank you, Enya. And hello, everyone. And I think even from this image, I feel like there might be some familiar faces in the audience. So when Sarah and I first got together to brainstorm ideas for the Remembrance Day exhibition, many, many years ago, one of our dreams was to initiate an exhibition that both involved our community and the symbol of the poppy. So needless to say, the Poppies of Goulbourn project is a project that really is close to both Sarah and my heart. Now, while we were trying to figure out what we were going to be doing, we debated about using panels covered in poppies and setting them up as an art installation. We debated about if it should be inside or outside, if it should be on-site or off-site, who are we going to partner with, how would we install it. The possibilities seemed endless, as well as the opportunities. But then things kind of stalled and nothing seemed to be quite right for what we had in mind. Then 4 years ago, with the support of the museum's fiber art group, Yap and Yarn, the project once again began to take shape. From that project, or from that project geared towards fiber arts, they started to, from that fiber art project geared towards sharing the significant military contributions made by people who have lived in our area as lived in our Ottawa area. So that's where it just kind of started to take shape. Sarah, a little tongue twisted there.
So the first poppy net was installed in November of 2018, and this really served as a pilot project for us. The first year allowed our staff to examine the durability of our materials, how we could install the net safely on a heritage building, and how volunteers could support the project. So the project began as a sole partnership between the museum staff and members of the museum's fiber arts circle, as Tracy mentioned, Yap and Yarn. As a result, the visibility of the 2018 project and positive feedback from the community allowed us to do a multi-year commitment to grow Poppies of Goulbourn.
Then in 2019, the Poppies of Goulbourn program or project grew exponentially in popularity and involved so many wonderful contributions from our community, from people of all ages and backgrounds. In all, staff responded to over 102 individual email inquiries about the project. We hosted 2 3-hour sessions for our volunteers to attach over 500 donated knit and crocheted poppies to the existing net from 2018. And now at 600 poppies, the net attracted attention from local media and many passerbys who stopped by to take photos of the brilliant display. Yes, so this is an image in the November 14th, 2019 issue of Your Community Voice. The photo features what some of you may see as a recognizable face. Johnny LaRue is a well-known community member and Korean War veteran who is standing in front of the installation.
So in 2020, the Poppies of Goulbourn project expanded during the pandemic, with volunteers dropping knit and crocheted poppies off curbside on our site. So we also had many generous poppy donations come by the post, which was great. The year's community participation and response was outstanding, with 807 new poppies submitted by our volunteers. Although the site closure and physical distancing kept us from welcoming the community to sow our poppies on the net. Next slide. In 2020, our staff worked behind the scenes to make sure that the second net would be ready for poppy donations in 2021.
Mm-hmm. And the museum's goal is to continue the community participation in the project. Volunteer and community groups can help by creating new poppies and attaching poppies to the net. Our hope is to grow the Poppies of Goulbourn project until it's large enough to cover the entire museum building.
Thank you, Sarah and Tracy. The Poppy Project is a wonderful example of Goulbourn Museum's investment in recognizing Goulbourn Township's military history and the contributions of past, present, and future veterans. The museum also holds many records and artifacts that speak to the township's military history. These are a little more difficult to share with a wide audience, but the museum is committed to making them as accessible as possible. Jonah, can you take us through the Transcribing Goulbourn project and how it's enabling the museum to make these records more publicly available?
Thanks, Anya. So hello, everyone. I'm Jonah. I'm new here. I'm the Assistant Curator of Collections at the Goulbourn Museum. And this summer, my role is to assist collections by overseeing the Transcribing Goulbourn project. So the project involves our amazing volunteers who have been reading scans of historic military documents and typing the text for us from their homes so that we can share the content online. So this project started way back in April 2020 at the very beginning of the pandemic. And this is when the museum and the community were looking for ways to continue being useful despite being in isolation. The unique situation resulted in a partnership between the museum and the West Ottawa Homefront, whose members are retired and current military spouses, as well as serving members of the Canadian Armed Forces living here in Ottawa. And over the following couple of months after that, about 10 volunteers from the Homefront worked remotely to transcribe 261 pages of manuscripts from the Great War, and they transcribed about 15,000 words in total. And these resources, you can see them now. They're available on the Ottawa Museums and Archives Collections website at ottawa.minesis.inc.com. So yeah, the project went so well last year that the museum has created the long-term goal to digitize all of the museum's genealogical records and written materials. This will make the collection more accessible so that people can read and study the textual artifacts that belong to the community. And there'll be more on that in the presentation later. Now this summer, we're continuing the initiative. Our next milestone is to finish transcribing the letters of Private Sefton Stewart, during the First World War. So you probably heard that name a couple times already. So for those of you who don't know, Sefton Stewart was born in 1898 and raised in Richmond, Ontario. At the age of 17, he joined the Canadian Expeditionary Force and was sent to Europe to fight in the Great War. He served with the 77th Battalion, 73rd, and 13th. So to learn more about his experience overseas, you'll have to wait until the exhibit opens later on. But in the meantime, you can read the letters yourself online, as I mentioned. And they will also be released in chronological order, 105 years to the day they were written, starting July 2nd this summer. So stay tuned to the museum's social media for more details on about how to read those. So like I said, things are going so well with the project. And we could not have made it to this point without our faithful volunteers. In their own words, they are very happy for the opportunity to help the museum during the pandemic and to connect with this period of history. So a couple of quotes we gathered. This one's from Jessica Dobson. This is very exciting. I've enjoyed getting to know Sefton through his letters so far. Transcribing his letters gave me a personal perspective on the war. Time has definitely provided some distance, which can cloud our connection to history. But reading these letters helped me picture those important events clearly. And then a second one that we really liked from Beth Bassinger is, thank you so much for this. I needed a purpose, and this is awesome. So just showing this is an amazing way for people to work with history during the isolation of the pandemic. Now, this is just a small bit of a wealth of positive feedback that we've got back since starting the project, and unfortunately we don't have time to share them all. But as you can see, we have many happy volunteers assisting with the project, but we're always looking for more help. So let us know if this is something you'd be interested in being a part of, and contact us to let us know. So for now, I'm going to hand things back to Enya to continue the presentation.
Thanks, Jonah. This project, I think, really highlights how integral our volunteers are. Sarah, can you expand more on the role that digitization and transcription will play as the museum seeks to optimize the accessibility of its collections materials?
For sure, thanks, Enya. So building on Jonah's words about the Transcribing Goulbourn project, I'd like to talk about how transcription really turned into a new digitization strategy for the museum. So looking back on 2020, our ability to share physical objects with the community changed overnight due to COVID-19. So our physical artifact collections, our research collections, and our physical exhibitions became inaccessible. So what did we learn from this? Honestly, 2020 taught us that we have a lot of work to do to make the museum's collections accessible. Reflecting on the success of the Transcribing Goulbourn project, our staff began removing barriers to information and improving the visibility of the museum's collections. So what are some of the barriers that we have to accessing information? So researchers can use digital copies of the museum's objects, but providing a digital file is not enough to improve the accessibility of a collection. So as you can see from this example letter in Sefton Stewart's collection, a significant barrier to accessibility includes literacy. So what am I talking about here? So basically it goes beyond being able to interpret the physical, beautiful handwriting that the letters have been written in. And with the time available tonight, I'm only going to speak very generally about adult literacy, but to remove barriers to information, we have to consider things like 2 in 5 Ontarians over the age of 15 do not have the literacy skills they need for daily tasks. 16% have serious literacy challenges that cause difficulty with basic handwritten materials. Reading disabilities affect approximately 10% of the population. 4% of adults in Goulbourn, aged 25 to 64, have not completed their high school diploma, and that stat rises to 6% when we look at the city of Ottawa. No. 3% of Canadians over the age of 15 identify as having vision impairment that limits their daily activities. 0.7% of Goulbourn residents don't speak French or English, and 0.2% of Goulbourn residents only speak French. So how does transcription improve access and remove barriers? Once a typed transcription of a manuscript is complete, we use computer technology to remove barriers. So typed text can be presented in different fonts, different sizes, boldness, and colors. Contrast can make text more readable for everyone. For those with poor vision or forms of color blindness, the contrast for text can be the difference between being able to read it or not read it. Some individuals use a screen reader to access digital information, and screen readers use a text-to-speech software, which translates on-screen information into speech, which is then heard through a speaker. For Goulbourn residents who don't speak English as their first language, text transcriptions can be used in a translation software or professionally translated services. And before passing the conversation to Tracy, I want to say something quickly about barriers to developing physical collections. So what I'm talking about isn't the storage concerns that many heritage institutions are facing currently. Some objects have significant value to the owner because they're either family heirlooms or they're culturally significant items. And these are passed down through generations. So a digital donation provides an opportunity to share while respecting an object's role with a donor. So digital donations are artifacts that are preserved in digital files instead of stored on our physical shelves. They are digital museum assets. Collection staff document the original to the best of our ability, and then the donor donates the history of the object and permission to share the content with the community. So does this replace physical collections? Absolutely not. Having the physical artifact to examine and share is always the best scenario. However, sometimes it's just not possible, and the information preserved in a digital collection could not otherwise be shared by the museum. So with that in mind, examples on the screen here from 2021 digital donation, which included 39 pieces related to the story of Sefton Stewart, benefit the digital collection by allowing staff and community awareness of the Stewart family's experience during the First World War. So building on what's been discussed thus far, the exciting work digitizing, transcribing, and acquiring digital collections has allowed staff to support the museum's first digital exhibition. And with that, I will pass the conversation back to Enya.
Thanks, Sarah. So, as Sarah so beautifully outlined, the museum is in a place where we have stewardship of these physical and digital artifacts, plus the transcriptions of Sefton Stewart's letters. So the question is, what do we do with them? Where do we go from here? And Tracy, I'll let you describe our idea.
Great, thank you, Enya. So the evolution of the museum's With Love to All virtual exhibition came about over time as the initiatives presented above by my colleagues began to unfold. So exhibition conceptualization, research, and development occurs at the very least a year in advance of when they're launched. But how do you plan for an exhibition if you don't know whether or not you'll be able to access the museum's collection, its reference library, or even be on site to build? And for those of you who may not know, we're very proud to say that the museum does design and construct all of our own exhibitions in-house. So perhaps we were going to have to delay. I mean, even if we did launch a new exhibition in 2021, would people even want to come on site to visit it? With so many uncertainties, how do you plan? That's when a remarkable thing happened. Like many sectors and organizations, we started to adapt on how we approached things. Collections initiatives to work virtually took place, and Transcribing Goulbourn was born. The concept of a digital artifact collection was developed and then implemented. Programs look to connect with our community in a social distance and virtual capacity. So our community was still connecting with us, only now it was virtually. We were doing it from a distance. Though we were isolated from friends, family, and loved ones, we could still communicate. We could still talk about our shared experiences during the pandemic, And we can still work towards a common goal, such as making poppies or transcribing documents. And that's really when With Love to All started to take shape. As staff and volunteers worked at transcribing and reading the Sefton Stewart letters, a parallel between the Goulbourn community during the First World War and today became apparent. And each letter provided further insight into a young man and his family's experiences. They offered us a unique perspective of a Goulbourn youth during a time of tremendous global unrest. And they opened up the possibility of exploring some of the similarities and differences that took and are still taking place today. So during COVID, as we waited at home wondering what the next day had in store, as realities of everyday life shifted, and as we worried about the health and safety of loved ones, so too did Sefton and his family 105 years ago. So over the course of the next 4 years, the museum's first ever solely virtual exhibition, With Love to All, will invite visitors to follow the experience of a Goulbourn youth during the Great War. And as Jonah mentioned, the first phase of this multifaceted virtual exhibition will begin on July 2nd, when the museum posts a copy of a transcription of the first of Sefton Stewart letters. For the next 3 years, the museum will continue to post letters chronologically on the day that they would have been sent 105 years ago. At the end of October, the museum will then mount its Poppies of Goulbourn installation on the side of the museum. And poppy contributions from our community over the course of COVID has allowed this installation to really grow tremendously. So really, you're going to want to look for a much bigger impact this year. And then in November, the museum will launch year one of a 3-year virtual exhibition. Each year will explore a specific concept that will guide the narrative. And this year's theme is going to be transitions. So this exhibition is really where we're going to invite our community to draw their own parallels, to share with others their experiences today and compare them to those of a youth 105 years ago during a time of global unrest.
And to complement the release of the Sefton Stewart letters, we also wanted to give people the opportunity to engage with the digital material through a new angle by providing a hands-on component, even for a digital project. That's why we decided to create physical postcards on the theme of With Love to All. The plan is to make these postcards available starting July 23rd, which coincides with the release of a Sefton Stewart letter. The postcards will have prepaid postage and be available for free. We hope that participants will use the cards to write to their friends and family, truly living out the sentiment with which Sefton Stewart signed off his letters, With Love to All. Handwriting and sending a physical message can be a really meaningful act. It's an echo back to historic practices of letter writing and a direct connection to the artifacts that we are featuring in the exhibition this fall. It also encourages people to slow down and create something that takes extra time and effort. And in doing so, it perhaps carries an additional significance to the senders and recipients alike. So the postcards you see on the screen were designed by our wonderful communications team at the museum. The front is an image of a letter sent by Sefton Stewart, written on October 7th, 1918, from an undisclosed location in France. The image is overlaid with Sefton's signature sign-off and the namesake for our exhibition this fall. If you're interested in receiving a free postcard or even a bundle of postcards, please keep an eye out on the museum website and social media channels, where we will be posting more information in the coming weeks. Before we wrap up, I also want to highlight the opportunity to participate in the ongoing Poppies of Goulbourn project. As Sarah and Tracy mentioned earlier, this year will be the 4th consecutive year that Goulbourn Museum will mount the outdoor poppy installation for Remembrance Day. And we're looking to continue to expand the installation by receiving new handmade poppies. So if you would like to contribute, please visit the web address shown on the screen for more details and instructions on how to create the poppies following either a knitting or a crochet pattern. and the museum will begin collecting the poppies for this year around the end of August. And of course, if any of the other topics we've touched on tonight spark your interest, we do encourage you to reach out to us at info@goulbournmuseum.ca and get involved. As Jonah emphasized previously, as a small core team, we truly do rely on the contributions of volunteers to undertake ambitious and time-intensive projects like the Transcribing Goulbourn Initiative. So thank you everyone for coming to get the sneak peek at our upcoming exhibition and the additional projects connected to that. And at this point, we will stop the recording and we'll open up the floor to any questions or comments.